The presidency says there has been significant progress made on the recommendations of the State Capture Commission, with 4 state capture-related cases already concluded with guilty verdicts and nearly 11 billion rand of stolen public funds recovered. This was revealed as part of the presidency's latest progress report covering the period up to the end of Q4 of 2024-2025. It also revealed that 48% of the 60 actions identified in President Cyril Ramaphosa's October 2022 response plan have been completed or substantially completed. Well, to discuss this further, we're joined by Advocate Paul Hoffman. He's a director at Accountability Now. Advocate, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Leanne. It's great to be with you on SABC, and good morning to your viewers.
So, Advocate, let's talk about this. So the reports coming out claiming half of the president's response plan have been, substantially complete or complete. But public public confidence doesn't seem to be any higher after even receiving that, thinking, hang on, how do we reconcile these two differences? Public confidence in what's actually happened and the fact that we've received this thing saying, hey, we're doing really well, we're proud of where we're at.
I'm afraid that the president's announcement is really just a counter to the unhappiness expressed by the former Chief Justice Raymond Zondo when he spoke on the sideline of a conference called by the South African Council of Churches, a sort of indaba, an anti-graft indaba, which was held last Wednesday. And he gave an interview, the Chief Justice did, to the Sunday Times, which has been widely reported and commented on, to the effect that he felt terrible when he had to swear in cabinet ministers whom he had actually identified as suspects in the state capture report, and they just sailed on as if nothing had happened. It's one thing to say that 48% of the recommendations have been attended to, and it's quite another to reflect on the number of over 1,000 people were identified as involved in the corruption at the core of state capture, and we've seen a handful of prosecutions. He's boasting about 4. I mean, really, that's a drop in the ocean. If we've had 4 since 2022, that's 4 in 3 years. If we just stop at 1,000, you can see that we're going to be busy at the rate that they're progressing at the moment with state capture cases into the next century and beyond. It's really not good enough, and I don't know how they calculated 48%.
Yeah.
Are they doing that in terms of value, in terms of number of recommendations, in terms of the size of the job? I really don't know what formula was used to calculate that 48% of the recommendations have been attended to.
And
then some of them that have been attended to are simply lip service. The Commission asked that public procurement be better regulated and that a body independent of the executive be put in charge of policing what goes on in public procurement, that is the buying of goods and services by the state. So they create this body and they don't bother to put the independent policeman in place. They give that job to the National Treasury, which is not an independent body.
Yeah. Advocate, it's almost disheartening having a look at this report, and I think a lot of people agreeing. How did we reach these numbers? I mean, when we heard those comments from the former Chief Justice, I'm just going to quote if people did miss what he said, and I want us to maybe dwell on this a little bit. During this said conference you were talking about, that sideline interview, he went on to say it pained him to swear in cabinet ministers who had been formally implicated in serious state capture findings. He goes on to say he observed that with such appointments, it seems that the president was effectively saying, I don't care what you have found about these people. I think they're good enough to be promoted. You know, these are great concerns. I mean, he talks about the emotional and moral burden of all of this. And this is, you know, this is coming from somebody who sat through this commission, who compiled this documentation, who had to listen to all of these stories and yet still had to manage what's going on. I mean, what does this tell you about the president and how seriously he's honestly taking this?
Well, I think that the Chancellor of Free State University got it right when he made a speech in America a couple of months ago. He was receiving an award. This is Bonong Mohale. And he said greed is at the root of the problems in South Africa, and that the once glorious ANC had turned itself into a criminal enterprise. And that is really why the president seems to think that it's quite all right that so little has been done, and that it's in order to appoint and even promote. One was Zizi Kodwa was a deputy minister, and he was promoted to a minister. And he was even charged in between times, but of course, Mr. Chaki, who's the Director of Prosecutions in Gauteng, has subsequently been suspended, but he withdrew the charges against Kodwa. So it really isn't a serious attempt to clean up after the findings in the Zondo Commission's report. It more seems to be business as usual, and the business is that of exercising the greed of politicians who enter politics to enrich themselves at the public's expense, rather than to serve the people of South Africa. That, I'm afraid, is at the core of the problems that are going to be dealt with in the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, which is just getting underway. Tomorrow, that case will be in the Constitutional Court, and arguments will be put forward that the manner in which the president has gone about appointing that commission does not serve any legitimate purpose of government, and that having a acting minister of police sitting, keeping the seat warm for a new acting minister of police, while the real minister of police sits on gardening leave on full pay, is not something that was contemplated by the founders of South Africa when the Constitution was negotiated. There is an allergy to putting in place what the Constitutional Court called for in 2011. This is the root cause of the problem. In that case where the closure of the Scorpions and their replacement with the Hawks was being debated, the Hawks were found to be an unconstitutional body, and the court said what South Africa needs is a body outside the control of the executive to deal with corruption effectively. Now, we've never had such a body. It's not happened, and it's simply a lack of political will to comply with a binding order of court that was handed down during the first Zuma administration. We've had a further Zuma administration, and we're now in our second Ramaphosa administration, and the ANC just cannot bring itself to obey the court order and to create a single body outside executive control that specializes in dealing with corruption, that has trained experts on anti-corruption work, independent, both operationally and structurally, of the executive branch of government, and resourced in a guaranteed fashion with personnel who are secure in their tenure of office. In other words, they don't get fired for going after corrupt people in high places. That hasn't happened, And until it does, we are going to continue to have the kind of complaint that General Mkhwanazi raised on the 6th of this month, and that is going to be aired in the Constitutional Court tomorrow.
And Advocate, at the bottom line is really, I think, and we can see this all happening, is in and amongst all of this, South Africans are just getting poorer because we are paying for all these suggestions, all these commissions, all these inquiries, and we're talking billions. This is taxpayers' money. And ministers, acting ministers, deputy ministers, all of this kind of thing. And at the end of the day, South Africans just want justice. South Africans want to see that, you know, the right thing is done. But the excuses that we'll be told is that the justice system moves slowly. That's one of the president's favorite lines, and we know this. But if we look at this, and I know we don't have too much time, but you know, one of the things that was presented was that 21% of 218 state capture related investigations have reached trial or finalization. So they're sitting there. This pace can't be defendable. It can't be defensible. It really, really can't. And I mean, do we look at the justice system and say that this is overwhelmed? Is it complex? Or is it, as perhaps some people say, captured? What's going on here?
Yes, I'm afraid the justice system moves slowly because the ANC doesn't want it to move fast. It's as simple as that. There is a lack of political will to do what the Constitutional Court required in binding terms be done. And until we get that specialist body, we are going to fail in our basic constitutional objectives, which for the people is to enjoy human dignity, to participate in the guaranteed human rights that are set out in our Bill of Rights, which is part of the Constitution, and the promotion of the achievement of equality will continue to go backwards. South Africa is a more unequal country than it was 30 years ago, and it's becoming more unequal all the time because too much of the state assets are being stolen in the state capture and corruption activities, which are the bread and butter of the politicians who govern.
So, Advocate, I also want to ask, I want to quiz you about this, the report celebrating nearly 11 billion rand in recovered funds. Okay, I mean, that's great, I suppose. One would say that's really great. But critics argue that without high-profile convictions, this actually means nothing. And it's more of a, I suppose, a transactional form of accountability. That money, where is it? I mean, is it being paid and people just get away with it? Or, you know, what happens?
The 11 billion is actually largely money that was given back by organizations like Bain and the American consultants. The caught with their hand in a cookie jar, they surrendered their ill-gotten gains. And that is not a great win. It goes into the general revenue account. And in any event, it is a drop in the ocean. 11 billion is probably about 10% of what was stolen during the state capture process that was investigated by the Zondo Commission. The Daily Maverick has gone as far as to suggest that $1.5 trillion is the sum total of the proceeds of corruption in South Africa. So it's not to boast about that you managed to claw back money from people who don't want it anymore because they've been caught out. It would be much more impressive if steps were taken against those who looted state-owned enterprises, if there were civil proceedings across the world where the proceeds of the loot have been stashed away, and that we saw some activity on the criminal justice administration, which has been singularly absent ever since the Scorpions were closed down. They were closed down because they were getting on top of corruption. They got Jackie Salebi, who was the chief of police, locked up for corruption. They got President Zuma's personal advisor, Shabir Sheikh, locked up for corruption, and they were hot on the heels of Jacob Zuma himself. In fact, he's still facing a trial in respect of a matter that was, or matters that were investigated by the Scorpions. It was a grave error, and I think Chief Justice Ondo said so last Wednesday. It was a grave error to close down the Scorpions because they were doing a good job in difficult circumstances.
Okay.
What can be done now is that the bills that the DA, Breitenbach private members' bills for the creation of an anti-corruption commission should be processed quickly in Parliament.
Okay. Let's leave it there. Advocate, thank you. Some very key points given to us after what we saw happening yesterday. Advocate Paul Hoffman, the Director of Accountability, now talking to the Presidency's report on the progress made in regard to the State Capture Commission as identified in President Cyril Ramaphosa's October 2022 response plan.